Hi, everyone. My name is Michael Kramer, and I'm really excited and honored that I get a chance to speak to you today about our experience, my experience with setting up a virtual conference. I know that this is something that is probably pretty hot on your minds right now, given obviously the state of the world that we're in. A lot of plans have changed, a lot of things that were scheduled are no longer going to be scheduled, or we don't want to lose that schedule. So instead we're trying to accommodate for that. And so that's probably why you're here. So I'm going to take a little bit of time today. Again, I want to say thanks to the Greater Des Moines Partnership for this opportunity to speak to you guys. I'll share my screen here so you don't have to look at me all throughout, but nonetheless, I will share my screen, and then we will be able to have a chance to talk about some of the things that we did in our actual virtual conference that we had recently pulled off. So what you should be seeing now is my screen. And one of the things I want to talk to today, I'll just give a little bit of background about myself, right? Because I think that's important to understand a little bit about maybe where I've come from, but then I'm going to go dive in and talk about our story, right? The company that I work for, AgriSync, which we'll get into, what our story was and what really led us to where we did a virtual conference. And I think by doing that, that will really help you understand better what we were trying to do. And then also because of that, you'll have an understanding of why we did what we did. Okay. So with that, I'm just going to walk through the slides here. Look, again, my name is Michael Kramer. I'm head of marketing at AgriSync. We are a startup out in Waukee, so right here in the Greater Des Moines area. We are an ag tech startup, right? This is important because we're a tech company. We should be able to do techie type things, and that was one of the reasons that we chose to do it. But a little bit about myself still. I worked for Caterpillar. I worked for the Alzheimer's Association, Intertech, 8035 Marketing, which was my own small consulting firm, and then now, most recently, AgriSync. The two companies that you'll see, Caterpillar and Intertech, doesn't necessarily matter what they do. Most of you have probably heard of Caterpillar, but nonetheless, it's important that I put that on there because through those businesses, I've had a chance to go to a lot of conferences. I'm sure many of you have as well. I counted the other day. I've been down to Las Vegas for conferences over 30 times. That's a lot. But the reason I mention that is because I understand what conferences are. You know, I think there for a while, there was this thought that conferences are going to go away, that, oh, with the internet, we won't need it. They said the same thing about car dealerships. They said the same thing about financial advisors. I don't think the internet had overall changed, didn't stop things from happening. But what it did is it changed how we approached it, right? Even though we're more virtually connected now than ever, there's still something to be said about that one-on-one connection, right? That human interaction that we get from a conference. And what I'm going to encourage you guys to do today is think about that with your virtual conferences. Your virtual conferences, although virtual, of course, by nature, they really don't have to be of such that you feel disconnected, right? So what I'm going to say is one of the things that people really like about going to conferences, it's that human interaction. It's that feeling of sitting across from someone and talking. One of my favorite movies of all time is called Good Will Hunting. I'm sure many of you have heard of it or possibly even seen it. There's a scene where Robin Williams sits down with Matt Damon and he's talking to him on a bench in the park and he's trying to relate to him. And he says something along the lines of, you know, I don't claim to know what it's like to be an orphan just because I read Oliver Twist, right? No more different than you can't claim to know what seeing the Mona Lisa is like without having gone to the Louvre, right? Without being there, seeing the setting it's in, smelling it, touching it. Don't touch the Mona Lisa, you're not allowed to. But I'm just saying, like, these types of things, there's something valuable about being with someone, right? That's the value of a conference. Just because you're going virtual, I don't think that you have to lose all of that. Of course, you're going to lose some of that, right? But I think that there are ways that we can get through those types of things. And in many cases, let's, knock on wood, this is going to be a temporary thing. We'll get life back to normal soon enough. And when it does, there'll probably be still a combination of in-person conferences and virtual conferences as well. So let's continue down the path. So spoiler alert, right? These are the three things I really want to hit upon today. I don't have slides that say, here's how you be human. Here, I do have slides that talk about the TPS, and then the last one about keep them engaged. These are the three things that I'm going to say that if you do these three things, you will have a successful conference, virtual conference, right? And they're not easy. I'm not going to say that they're easy, but I'm saying if you keep these three things in mind, I guarantee you'll have success, right? The first one, be human. I just mentioned that, right? Being human is exactly that. There's something about sitting across from someone, talking to them, getting a chance to see their interactions, feeling their personality, right? I'm hoping that today you get a chance to learn a little bit more about me and the type of person I am, right? As we go through this. So I want that to come through, even though it's virtual. I want this to come through the ones and zeros and the interwebs that are in between us, right? So be human, act human. It's okay to make a mistake as a human being, right? But let's minimize the technical mistakes, but be human. Understand that people on the other side of the screen are cheering for you, just like you cheer for them when you're listening to them, right? The next part is the TPS. If you've ever seen the movie Office Space, and I know I've already referenced 2 movies so far. Don't worry, it doesn't get any worse than that. But the movie Office Space, the TPS report. As a marketer, I had to put something in that I hope that you would remember it. So I put TPS, technical, presentation, and speakers, right? We're going to go through these in a little bit more details, and this is where a lot of the meat is. But I'm saying if you can do these 3 things as a part of this, the TPS, if you get your technical part down, you get your presentation, your content right, and you get the right speakers, the engaging speakers who know what they're doing and they don't get flubbed up in the middle of doing things because they don't understand the technology. I'm telling you, it's going to flow smooth. Also, the last thing is keep them engaged. And this is one of the things that, I'd love to do that a little bit more today. This is one of these meetings that is a little bit more of a push of information, right? If we had 2 hours, I would probably get some more feedback throughout. I'm going to encourage you guys to go ahead and ask questions. I'm going to take those questions as we go because I don't like to wait to Q&A to the very end, because if you have a question now, I want to answer it now, right? I'm going to encourage you to do that too. Keep them engaged, right? One of the things that we found out with the conference that we did was that we scored really high on the engagement. People liked what we did. I still think that there's more ways to do that, right? But I think we scored so high is because people did like what we have to say and they felt a part of it, even though literally they were sitting on different sides of the world. We had people in the UK, we had people in Australia, we had people in the US, we had people in Canada, right? So, I mean, we had people literally across the world, but they were all came together and they were all chatting in and they were all talking to us via that way. That's the engagement that you want to drive. That's the engagement that you want to do to be human, right? And that's part of the thing about a real conference is being that way. So that's probably the most explicit I'll get on talking about being human and keep them engaged. But the TPS I'll dive into a little bit later. But I wanted to dive into those at the very beginning. If you do these 3 things, if you got cut off from this little webinar right now, I think you're going to be okay. If you keep those 3 things in mind. So our story, right? Our story, again, I want to tell you a little bit about our story because I think it'll help you understand exactly where and why we did things the way we did, right? First and foremost, again, I'm with a company called AgriSync. We are an ag tech company. And our software, we're a SaaS company. So we provide a software that works between advisors, ag professionals, and producers, right? Maybe a little bit easier way to understand it is we provide a communication software between dealerships and farmers, right? A lot of things that we do is a collaboration of things. It helps them be more productive. It helps really do a lot of what we're talking. It helps them, the advisors engage with farmers a lot more, right? So as an ag tech company, right, one of the things that we want to do, what we try to do is we try to enhance the customer experience. We recognize that we are only a part of the customer experience, that we're not the end all be all when it comes to the actual customer experience. There's more to that. But what we've tried to do over time is really position ourselves as a thought leader. Okay, this is important because when we put together our virtual conference, we wanted to be someone that didn't just push information. We wanted to be the person that got people thinking differently, right? Thought leaders are thought leaders no matter what industry you're in, right? But I think that they mean a little something to different industries. In our industry, we were trying to talk about, or the segment of the agriculture industry that we focus on, again, is that customer experience. So we wanted to get people talking about, all right, what are those customer experience things that we could collectively all benefit from, right? We talked about things that had to do with onboarding employees. I'll be honest with you, our software is pretty great. Really doesn't have a lot to do with onboarding. Now, people who are onboarding can utilize our software and there's a way to do it, but I would never sell our software as onboarding software, right? It just doesn't make sense. And they would be highly disappointed if that's what they were going for. But that's not, that is the point of this, right? We didn't want to put a conference out there that was just about us. We weren't doing a big sales pitch, right? We were really focusing in on being a thought leader and trying to drive conversation and trying to drive engagement with our clients. Bottom line is to do that, like, we had to be engaging. We had to talk about things they wanted to talk about, right? And there you go at the very bottom. We also have engaged customers. We have a lot of customers who want to talk to us. And that's really what drove, or what was the impetus behind us putting together a conference in general, and then the virtual conference, right? Really what it was is the idea that we wanted to engage our customers to talk about these things. So we had to bring customers on. We had to bring industry personnel on. So that's exactly what we did. We found customers. We said, here are our topics. And we found customers that we knew would talk, and we set it up in a panel style, right? So what I'll do is I'll actually show you guys, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our journey right now, okay? And then I'll show you exactly how a little bit of this looked. So with the journey of our virtual conference, what we wanted to do was we wanted to connect our customers in a way that will allow them to learn from one another, gauge themselves amongst their industry peers, and help them grow their business. This is kind of a unique thing to what we do, since we talk to so many different customers, right? We talk to folks that are competitive, that have territories that butt right up next to each other, that are vying for the same customers. So we talk to them all, right? And we don't share any one thing specific about one type of customer or one individual customer with another. But what we do have is the opportunity to look at a lot of different things. We have the opportunity to hear what a lot of them collectively are doing, right? And so that's where a lot of this came from. They're always asking us, well, what are other people doing, right? So that's what drove us to do this. Now, that's important for the virtual conference as well, because we wanted that conversation to go on. We wanted that ability to bring different clients together, right? Not our clients, I should say, different industry personnel and people together, and allow them to feel comfortable talking about things and benchmark themselves or gauge themselves, right? And learn from others. A little bit of a rising tide. We see it as there's enough business out there for the people that, this was an element of growing the pie and not necessarily trying to eat away at each other's. But to do that, we had to be engaged. So what I'm going to say is this, this is like getting married to a degree, right? If you can, the first three things that you guys need to do is treat this like you just about to get married, right? To be successful, you need a date. You need to make sure you figure out your guests and your topics, and you need to figure out the venue. If you get those three things down, you can start. Without any of those three things, you can't, right? We started with a save the date. And so to do that, we needed those three things. We could actually kind of skimp out a little on the guest, and I'll tell you about that in a second. But with the date, we needed to know the date. We needed to know the topics that we were going to talk about. So we didn't just say, hey, come to our conference, we'll make it worth your while. We were able to say, hey, come to our conference, we're going to talk about these 5 things, right? And then also the venue that I'm speaking of is not the physical place, since this is a virtual conference, but the venue that I'm actually speaking of would be the medium that you go through, right? It's the actual, we use Zoom, and we use Zoom communication. Oh, sorry, Zoom webinar, my bad. And we chose that because it was simple for us to use, but we figured that out early. And then what we were able to do is actually, I suppose you could wait just a little bit on the venue, but you definitely need to let them know that it's going to be virtual versus something else. You can't say, oh, we're going to do a virtual conference and we're going to do it. You got to give the date. It's good for them and it's good for you. Get the date. Get the guests and the topics, right? When I say they're good speakers and they're engaging, and we knew that they were well liked in the industry. So we did both guest and topics. We said, okay, well, let's get Bill, because we know Bill's good and people will be attracted to Bill coming to this. What can he talk about? And we made sure that fit in. So we got the date, the guests and the topics, and of course the venue. When I say the venue, I mean, what platform are you going to use? This goes to your checklist. This is important. We used Zoom, okay? Spoiler alert, again, we had to upgrade our Zoom to Zoom webinar. It cost $140, and that was for a 1-month subscription. It's month by month. I'm not advocating for Zoom. Do use what you use, and I would say do the research out there. We're very familiar with Zoom. That played well into it, and I'll talk a little about that a little later. But pick your software. That's your venue. When I first started this, I said, oh, I know what these virtual seminars are. You can actually go into a virtual room and you can move your mouse around and you can see different areas and you can stop at tables and talk to vendors. I talked to a few of those. You're looking at spending about, well, the ones I talked to, you're looking at spending about 20 grand. Completely caught me off guard. I think that for a lot of you, I'm guessing if you're on this call right now, that's not the type of virtual conference you're looking for. You're looking for a way to bring people together and do it in a way that is quick and but still effective, right? And that's exactly what we were looking for. What we're using today is Zoom meetings. With Zoom meetings, I can see all the different people who are on here. They can chime in, they can't chime in. With Zoom webinar, you have a little bit more control as the provider to stop people from seeing who's all on, which was important for us. Even though we said we were trying to bring people together, we didn't necessarily want to this competitor A to know how many number of competitor B was on there. That's not important. That would have been distracting. So we upgraded, and we actually upgraded to three different Zooms total. One was for 140, one was for 40, and one was for another 40. So we spent about approximately $250 on the venue using Zoom. Okay, and I'll talk about that in just a second more as we continue. Going forward, look, don't worry about reading this. And this is one of the things I said, if you put too much on a screen, people are not going to pay attention to what you're saying. I just put this up here to show you. So we created a landing page. As soon as we knew that date and we figured out that schedule, we started promoting. We didn't have everything in line. It's just like a wedding. You send out the save the date and say, hey, this date, this time, this place, make sure you're there. And that's what we did. So we created a bunch of landing pages. We actually did some promos to do it. When we started off, just to let you know, this is one of the things we learned. We thought we wanted to show people that this conference was worth it. Let's charge them $25. And then with that $25, we'd almost essentially give it back to them through a couple of different things we were doing. We started off that way. We got some people to register, but they weren't coming in at the pace we wanted to. So we actually started to waive the fee and refund the fee to the people who were already paid. So that was one of the things that we learned. We went through Eventbrite to do those types of things, and it was pretty easy. It did add an extra layer. It added extra time and a little extra frustration. So again, that's another thing you wanted to do. Do you want people to pay or not? We chose not. And I think that, well, we chose pay, but in the end, we ended up backtracking that a little bit. We did do a survey at the end and asked how much people would be willing to pay. 2 people actually said, out of 40, said that they would, who responded, said that they would pay $100, and about an equal amount said that they'd pay $0. So it actually evened out between all the different amounts that they would pay to right around $25 to $35. So, hey, we got some good feedback on that. And I'm not going to sit here and harp on that, but just wanted to let you guys know a little bit about that. Then the day of, you can actually see we had a landing page. So we created a page using Zoom. This is some of the stuff I'm not going to get into, but technically it's not that hard. We basically said, okay, this page was closed off. You couldn't find it via Google. But if you had the URL, you could go, you could click, and you can get in. And the only way you're going to get that URL is if you actually registered, right? So once you registered, we sent you that URL and you got in. You can see there's the main session, then there's the green room and the gray room. That's how we kind of divided things up. I think some of you are going back to that one question that said, how do you do this? Is there a way to, what do you say? Do you do it one continuous? You can do breakouts into rooms. I will say this, it adds a level of complexity, not insurmountable, and it's not even not worth it. I just want you to know that when we did the green room and the gray room and then the main room, whew, it got a little tough. So I want to make sure I'm okay on time. Mike, I think, I didn't know if we were going to take the full hour or if it was going to be, I got about another 10 minutes more material, but I want to keep the questions coming in as they go. Do I have time to go through some more of my slides? That was for Mike. Okay, he responded to me. So here it is. I just want to show you this because sometimes, like I said, we're visual creatures. There's our president and founder, Casey Neiman. We will work out in the Waukee Innovation and Learning Center. But look what this is. This is what it looks like on the end behind me. Just so you guys know, I think I can do this really, really quick. I can choose a virtual background, right? If you guys can guess, since we're all hunkered down here in Armageddon, I'm in an unfinished basement when I have a screen behind me. These are weird things that we all have to think about, right? So we have these different things. By the way, if I had a poll, one of the things I was going to do to engage with you guys, I was going to ask if you liked this background. I don't know if you can see that, this background. So I'm going to switch about backgrounds just to have a little bit of fun as we go. But this is what it looks like, right? I would recommend standing. I'm standing right now. I think there's an element of standing, being more engaged, getting that blood flowing as you're talking. So having your speakers stand. If you see on this screen, that's, I'm using that same mic right now, and I'm using that same computer. I guess I'm using a different computer, but nonetheless, look what I have there. I have a little sign, a little Post-it note that says, look here. You know why that's important? Because with the virtual conference, I hope I don't ruin anything, no one wants to see the top of your forehead as you're going through things. This is not an appropriate way to give a virtual conference, right? What you want to do is you want to make sure that you are set up in a way that is conducive to being engaging, to get people to listen to you. You want to make people smile and laugh because of what you're saying, not because they see all the different lines, what do they call those, frown lines and wrinkle lines you have on your forehead, right? So this is what it looks like. Here's another picture of it. Here's another session that we had. Originally, Casey was just talking. Then there's he and Bobby sitting there talking. That's what it looked like on our end, right? We had a lot of different, you'll see that there's an extra microphone there. There's water there. You can see that it's not a fancy thing. If you look on that lower left-hand picture down there, you'll see that they're behind that, the computer there is an extra camera, and it's being held up by the camera box. Don't focus on the things that aren't important, right? That camera was perfectly placed to be height level, and that's actually an adjustable desk. I'd like to say that I'm over 6 foot, but I'm not. Casey is. So when he was standing there talking, you know, we were able to adjust the height of the desk so it matched. These are the little things that I think you want to be thinking about. I know it's easy to get lost in some of the details, but I have a little tip for you on that as we go forward, right? So again, spoiler alert, I just want to say, how would you rate the overall useful of the information in the conference? We did a follow-up survey, which I would recommend doing too. We use SurveyMonkey. We do not have a paid subscription, so we were limited in how many questions we could ask. We were limited in how many answers we could get. We could only get 40. We had about 75 people on the webinar or on the virtual conference, which was pretty good. We weren't for sure what to expect. We had over 140 registrants, so about 50% attendance. But I will say between 70 and 75 people hung on the whole time. That was impressive. And I'm going to tell you a bit about the feedback that we got. So 8.1, we said, how useful was this information? I put 5 as useful and 10 is extremely useful. So the fact that they're above 5 makes me feel good. How likely are you to recommend this conference to someone? This is the old Net Promoter Score question. And we're in that zone of feeling pretty good, somewhat likely to extremely likely. Based off some of the feedback, I think we got some better ideas going forward. And some of those were very specific to us, but some of those I'm actually sharing with you now just through the conversation I'm having, right? So here's some recommendations I'm going to throw out there, okay? And these are these 3 things that I was talking about. Technical, presentation, speaker prep. This is a little bit of that checklist that I think is important, okay? With technical, let me say this. There is nothing more frustrating for you as the listener of this to have me sit here and say, oh crap, stop sharing what's going on here. If you're like me, it raises my anxiety levels as an attendee, right? I think people understand technical things happen, technical issues, but those technical issues really, I think, are we're more forgiving for those when they are because of the software and not because of the user error. There's nothing more frustrating than a user error just because the person, oh, this isn't the presentation I used. Well, that's not Zoom's fault, right? So the reason I say that is practice, practice, practice. I'm saying if you haven't practiced the technical run through 4 times, you haven't done it enough. 4 times. And in those things, what you should be looking at is the lighting. You should be looking at, you should be doing sound check. We had a Wi-Fi check. So what we did was we hardwired, you can see on my computer there onto the right-hand side, you can see a little purple cord. We hardwired into the wall. That isn't something I don't think I've done since the 90s. I don't know. It feels like a long time ago since I've actually used an Ethernet cord, but it was faster. And then we also had an additional Wi-Fi we could have used that was on a different network from that. So if the Ethernet failed and then the Wi-Fi failed, we had phones. We could have set up mobile hotspots, right? So, and then if that happened, we actually had someone who was remote from the conference who could have gotten on, or who was a host of ours. And so the conference would have never broken continuity unless the gods were just really angry with us that day, I suppose, and they would have canceled it all. But so we had backups for this, and I was very proud of it. And you know what? Because we had so many backups, we didn't need it. Only if we wouldn't have had all that planned where we've needed it, right? But my point is, think of it. We had multiple computers ready to roll. We had people in different rooms. And we're not a huge team. We're a team of, I think the people that participated in this from our end were probably 4 or 5 at most. So it's not a small amount, but this wasn't a team of 15, 20 people. This was 4 or 5 people just strategically placed, knowing what was going on, and we're all a part of this. That's important. I just hear just another one. One of the things is I would say make sure you also have a point person, the person who knows what is going on. That was me, but also we have a very tech savvy team, as you would imagine, coming from a tech company. So a lot of people were, right? The next part is the presentation. And what I'm really saying with this one, this is kind of the no-brainer. Have the right speakers, right? Have the right content. If you don't do that, content is everything. You've got, if people, you tell people they're going to do something and they go there and they don't get it, they're going to be frustrated. So as important as all this other stuff is, you can have the most technically sound thing. If they're not intrigued, they're going to drop off. I think the best compliment we got was in the suggestions when we said, what is something we could do better for next year? And I think 3 or 4 people said we need more bathroom breaks. So if you're taking notes, write this one down. Include bio breaks into your virtual conference. In fairness, not to get too personal, but I used the restroom twice, so I guess it makes sense that someone else would probably want to use it during that 4-hour period. We didn't think of that, right? Our idea was we wanted to keep them so engaged that we didn't want to give them a chance to get distracted with some light elevator music playing, so they would have left or they would have gotten onto an email or something, right? That was the wrong thing to do. We should have had bio breaks. But the best compliment, I should say, was the fact that someone said, I wanted to use the restroom during your transitions, but I didn't want to miss anything. And I was like, oh, thank you. Apparently what we were saying during those transition periods, which I'll talk about in a hot moment, was so valuable that they didn't want to go. To me, that says good stuff. Okay, so now we have to build in breaks. I'll tell you what I told my wife, who's doing some of these things with Drake. Their mascot is a bulldog. I said, here's what you need to do. Don't go to a black screen. Make sure that there's something live on the screen there. So they have this bulldog. His name is Griff. I said, take the camera, put it on Griff, and if he's sleeping and he's snoring or he's rolling around, fantastic. Keep people engaged. Keep people watching. Don't give them a reason to leave, but also respect the fact that the human body needs bio breaks every now and then, okay? So the presentation, make sure that it's engaging. I know it's hard for me to be engaging here just given the time that we have, but ask those questions. Do those things, include polls, and you know, if you can let people chat in, if you say, hey, you got a question, I'll unmute you. Why not? I mean, I don't think people are going to start jumping in and dropping F-bombs or get, share their political leanings or anything like that. They want to be engaged and they want to join with you. So just let it happen. So this is Josie. This is the thing I was going to say. Out of everything I leave you with today, transitions are huge from one speaker to the next, right? As a matter of fact, I was just on a webinar right before this, and I think it's like, if you ever watch the Olympics, if you watch a 4x1, what is it wins the race? It's the handoff, right? It's everyone is going so fast, and the time difference between the individual sprinters is so small. It's the handoff that matters. The handoff matters here too. What we did was I spoke, and then when I got done with my panelists, by the way, when I got done talking to my panelists, if this is important to you, no time for pleasantries, right? You're not being rude, but if I had Bill and Jane on my screen and I was talking to them, I asked them the last question. I was very courteous. I'm saying, you know what, Bill, I'm just going to ask you one last question before we go. I asked him. Bill gave his answer. And as that was going on, I said, okay, well, thanks, Bill. Appreciate it. And I knocked him and Jane off the screen. I didn't say goodbye. I said goodbye to them. I thanked them, but I didn't need them to say anything last, because you know what? That's not important. As the consumer of this, you want to keep things moving. This is Josie, and she was our hero. She did the transitions. She showed our software for that 5 minutes in between from one presentation to the next, and it worked fantastic. I will say we actually got compliments on how well our transitions worked. That's the time we thought people would use the restroom. We said, people are going to come and talk about industry topics. Well, we'll give them 5 minutes in between industry topics. We'll have Josie just show a little bit about our product during that time. And then they can use the restroom, they can get a drink, blah, blah, blah. She did such a great job that they didn't want to go. But I will say, I said goodbye to Bill, I said goodbye to Jane, and I said, well, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Josie. Josie popped on my screen, I dropped off, Josie took over, shared her screen. Then all of a sudden she came to her 5 minutes, I jumped on, she jumped off, and we moved. It was smooth, and it took practice. Do it, it's well worth the time. Okay, and this is probably my last most important thing, and I'm honestly done. It'll take me about 2 minutes to go through this. Speaker prep. This was something that I've learned over the years. So in ours, we had two different types of speakers, right? We had me, the moderator, and we had the panelist. So with the moderator, I was in control of things, right? I called my speakers ahead of time. And I said, Bill, Jane, individually, because I actually wanted that organic conversation. We did ours panelist style, and that's how we did it, because I thought it was engaging, just like an actual conference. I called Bill individually. I had a half-hour call with him. I said, Bill, this is what we're going to talk about. You and I. So actually, if you look at the screen here, you can see that there's Philip and Jeff. This is great because Philip is with a John Deere dealership and Jeff is with a Case dealership. These guys on this conversation was fantastic, because they're competitors, but they weren't letting everything out of the closet. They were just conversing. But ahead of time, we didn't put those two on the call ahead of time. I called Jeff, had a half-hour conversation with him. I called Philip, I had a half-hour conversation with him. I laid it out. With that, I said, this is what we're going to talk about, guys. Philip, this is who Jeff is going to be. Jeff, this is who Philip's going to be. Then I captured all that. I actually put it into a document. And you can see on this screen, right? Here's something I'm going to say to do. Put the calendar invite on your speakers' calendars, even if they're internal. This is just a screenshot of my calendar that I did. You can see this is just rubbish. It all says hold. But this one probably went to Keith. This one probably went to Taylor, right? But so that way it popped up on Keith and Taylor's time thing, and you can actually see I put the details in there, and I put it so I remember Keith didn't actually speak until 10:30, but you can see I put it on at 10 o'clock, and I actually even said here, or it says 10:15. I said, hey, you don't go till 10:15, but I don't want anyone, but if people can see your calendars internally, they're like, oh, well, Bill's got 15 minutes. I'll put my meeting on his. So I built out some time. And so I was very conscientious of doing that. So hold on one sec. I got some questions that are coming in. I want to make sure I get to these. Okay, this is good. Sorry. have this extended feedback ability participants. Yeah. So, yeah. So someone's talking about some of the price of Zoom accounts, and I will make sure to talk about that. But look, out of everything that I've done, this was one of the things that we were complimented well on. People said, "Hey guys, thank you for prepping us so well." I wasn't the only moderator. Bobby, who you saw a picture of earlier, we're talking with Casey. When he came in, oh, and I have it right here, guys. I don't, I'll show you. I'll stop sharing my screen for a second here. If you see this, when Bobby came in that day, he had a sheet, right? And I printed all these out because Bobby's a great guy. It has nothing to do with him. But I said, you know what? I'm going to print this out for Bobby. And on here, it said the description of the panel. It gave the name of the panelists. It gave their bios. We had the discussion questions he could use. And at the very end, not that you guys can see this, oops, sorry, the screen, we had the closing transitions. I made it simple enough so Bobby could just say, okay, next up, we're gonna do the review of the poll results from the lunchtime interactive activity we had with Casey. I tried to make things so easy for them that they couldn't fail. And guess what? They didn't. And it wasn't just because of this, it was because of the sessions that we did ahead of time. There was the conversations we had ahead of time. So I think I've shared a lot of stuff. I appreciate you guys listening in. I'm happy to share anything more. I've heard myself talk enough. I want to get more feedback and questions from you. So I'll open it up to questions. Mike, if people want to jump in and actually ask a question via the phone, that's cool with me. But, oh, here we go. So here's a question that says, do you have speakers in your office or were they all virtual as well? That's a great question. And I think the speakers, the panelists, right? The moderators were all in the office, which made sense. We were in a little cube. We had a conference room, and we jumped from me to Josie, and then Josie back to the next moderator. And then when that moderator was on, they had virtual people. So that Keith was in, we actually had a guy in Australia who was on. Rob jumped on from Australia, and he was on with, oh, now I can't remember. I think it might've been Taylor, and they were both on. So they were virtual. All three of us were virtual from each other. Even if we weren't, the moderators weren't in the same room, it really wouldn't have mattered. We would have some more technical things because now I would have had to care about my connection, Bobby's connection, and Casey's connection and Josie's connection. So we were all separate, but not an insurmountable thing we couldn't have gotten over. Okay, here's a great one. Why did you decide to do a virtual conference instead of in person? Will you do in-person conferences in the future? That's a great question. I will just say the quick and easy answer for that one, for us, and this is again with before the current situation, for us, we didn't have the critical mass to probably bring people in. We would have gotten some. I would probably even say we'd probably get a couple dozen people in, really, because we have some really power users of our product. But I think that we needed more. I think you want to, from my opinion, you want at least 100, maybe a couple hundred people in to get that real good conversation going. So we thought that this would be better. I think at least for the foreseeable future, 2021, we'll probably still do a virtual conference. If we continue to grow at the rate we want, maybe after that, we'll explore other things. Yeah, great question. Any recommendations on setting up lighting and sound? Oh, great question. Thank you so much. Any recommendations for setting up lighting and sound for the quality of those speaking? Sound, okay? I know we're talking virtual, and I'm standing here telling you, you got to look good. You want to interact. People are less forgiving on the sound, right? So I think you can potentially see, oops, sorry, my little microphone right here, right? This is about a $200 microphone. It's pretty good. It's worth it. Josie, because we were running out of microphones that day, she used her Apple thing, because this is better than the microphone on the default microphone on most people's computers. I say it's worth it. Amazon delivers them, so if you need it, and you can probably still get it pretty quick, I recommend making sure your sound is good. That being said, it's not the end all be all. I wouldn't say, oh, we can't do it because we can't afford a $200 microphone. That's okay. But I prioritize sound over video. That's my preference. I mean, think about it. when you see podcasts, you know, the sound quality and you see all those different things, right? I mean, they really focus on the sound over anything else. Real quick with regards to lighting, we had good natural light. Um, Actually, in my place right now, I forgot that light. I have just a couple lamps on just to warm my face up a little bit. I got that good Irish blood in me, so I can be a little pale this time of year. So I have a good window in front of me, but I definitely make sure you get your lighting right because, you know, I think people are conscientious about that. You want to make sure the speaker feels good, and you want them to look their best selves, right? So how many people joined virtually in your March conference? Yep. And I have no problem sharing this information. I think we had, like I said, we had about 140 or so, 150 people actually sign up. And then we had about 75 join on. That 75 jumped up and down, right? So I think the numbers were somewhere around 65 were on pretty consistently. And then 10 people jumped in and then 10 people jumped out or something like that. So the numbers seemed to rise and fall. I wasn't quite for sure what to expect. I think there's some things that we can do in the future to grow that. That's again on the promotion side. I do say keep people engaged. One of the things I think we should have done is gathered more questions on the front end, lesson learned. But I think that's something that you would be worthy considering. If you reach out to them and say, hey, Bill, what questions do you want to have answered? Or maybe show them, be more specific and say, hey, we're going to have Jane come in and she's going to talk about these 3 things. We didn't get to that level of granularity. Some of it just had to do with not necessarily knowing. And then some of it had to do with the, what do you want to say? Just the lack of resources we really had to do it. I mean, you guys are going to face that too, right? I'll say, make sure to prioritize what you think you can do. Someone brought up on the fact that wired headsets work well. I completely agree. I don't, to your point, while it looks nice that I don't have one of these hanging, I don't think any of you probably would have dropped off if you saw me talking like this the whole time. It's not a deterrent. It maybe feels a little weird, but I will say that I don't think something like that is a bad thing to have, right? So I don't think there's any more questions coming in. Just a final thought here, and then I'm happy to stick on to the full hour. I do appreciate everyone joining in. I'll share my screen one last time here. I think you guys can see it now. Oops, I got to hit share there. And then, you know, one last thing, as I was talking about, even as I got caught up, make sure that do not accept the answer when someone says, "Oh, I don't need to listen it, or I'm fine with Zoom. I'm good with that. No, we'll be good. My presentation's good." Don't believe them. Trust me. It doesn't matter if it's the boss. It doesn't matter who it is. Unless you are certain. I'll be honest with you. We got lucky because we do a lot of things through Zoom, and it was the one we used. So I didn't just have trust because I heard it. I had trust because I saw it literally on a daily basis. So when I went to Casey, our president, and I said, "Hey, are you good with navigating around?" and he said, "I'm good," I knew he was good. And when I said it to Bobby, I knew he was good. And Josie, we were all good. But if someone says, "No, I've used these before," make them prove it. 4 times minimum technical run-throughs. You will not be mad at yourself for doing it one extra time. If you, after 2 times you think you have it, look harder, right? It's like living in Iowa in the fall, and if you don't see a deer when you're driving, you didn't look hard enough, right? They're out there. You just have to look hard enough for them. So, like I said, the things I'll leave you guys with, the recap: be human, right? Try to let your personality shine through, right? It's okay to make mistakes, but make sure that the mistakes that you make are acceptable. Not again, you don't want to be standing up there looking at, don't let those things happen. Don't let those be the distraction, right? Be human, be yourself, try to be engaging that way. TPS, you do those, you get the technical part down, you make sure the presentations are right, and you make sure that your content is right, and you make sure your speakers are engaged. Trust me, they'll listen, they'll hang on. Going back to that question, how many people were on? Like I said, after I saw, when we first logged on, we're like, okay, all right, 70 people are on. Oh, let's see how many are on in a half an hour. And 70 people were on. And 70 people were on. And 70 people were on. I was like, okay, this is real. Our content is good. Yeah, Yeah. So that's what I have for you guys. Again, I have it on the Q&A. I really appreciate, again, the opportunity. If there's anything more, Mike, if you'd like me to cover anything more, I'm more than happy to do so. But yeah, this has been really fun for me too. While I wait for Mike to jump on, I will say that we did a follow-up survey again, got some really good feedback on it. The feedback wasn't anything that we won't use. I mean, that we took offense to a lot of it. We're like, yep, that was good stuff. One of the things I will say, we're in a very male-dominated industry with being in agriculture, right? I think just a little bit of the nature of it at this time. We were very intentional about trying to bring a little bit of diversity onto our panel. And I thought that really helped. And actually 2 people commented on that. We didn't have a lot of diversity maybe in terms of ethnicity, but we had diversity in terms of age and gender. And I think that was really important. And I think it just adds a little extra to it too. So I'm going to put that plug in there because I do believe those things matter. And like I said, if we're in a male dominated industry, but we definitely had a good portion. I can't say how many, probably 25% of our audience that was on were women. So to have 2 women panelists and to have Josie, she was our go-to, to have that extra one, I think it's nice to feel represented in these virtual conferences. So if you can, I definitely recommend do. Oh, actually there's one more.
Michael.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's just Michael. It's Mike Caldwell. I was just going to tell him on it. This is going great. Just keep going with the questions.
Yeah, I'm happy to do so. Did you have any other industry people that would sell to your customers or potential customers on there as speakers? Excellent question. And then if you did you have them pay to be speakers? Oh, great question. I really appreciate this one. This was one that we debated on. So the last question, do we have them? So we had industry personnel and experts is what we said. There were 3, well, let's make it this way. I will say 30% of our speakers were not peers. So when we had this conversation about bringing people on board, we went to a recruiter, Ag One Source, and we got a guy who we brought him on. Now, afterwards, we said we did not make him pay. We actually reached out to him and we said, hey, we're more than happy to reach out and tell everyone about you because we thought it was a benefit for us. We didn't feel like at this point in time we had the momentum or could make any guarantees about who would be on. So we kind of saw of it as like an in-kind, hey, we'll be happy to share Ag One Source as a just do a little slight promotion afterwards if you come on to give us some of your time. And he did, and he was awesome. So we did have people who were who could potentially sell, but I made it very clear, and they all respected it completely, that it was not an opportunity to sell. But I tell you what, in doing so, I know for a fact that they got some business out of it because they heard what Colin had to say, and they're like, "Wow, this guy knows what he's talking about. I need to call him." And so they did. And so I think if you're looking at that, if you're trying to find those, reach out to those industry personnel or those experts that you're looking for. Don't be afraid to ask them. I know that when I had my own marketing consulting firm, I love the opportunity to stand up in front of people and speak and just to say, yep, my name is Michael and I'm with 8035 and send me an email. And that's how I got a lot of my business. And I didn't promote. I mean, other than just giving my contact and just saying what I needed to say was all I needed to do. So great question. Yep. So Mike, it looks like some of the questions are dying down. Yeah, I really, again, appreciate the opportunity. And unless there's any more, we can call it.
All right. Well, Michael, thank you so much. This is Mike Caldwell. And for those of you on the call, we'll reach out to you afterwards with as much of the content and pieces and parts as we possibly can. So with that, I think we'll wrap the call up. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.